Hi, students. This is the first part of Macbeth. We're looking at Act 1 today because of remote learning. Things have been a little bit different, as you know. I want to review with you a couple of dates. And what I suggest you do, if you've already read through the first 5 pages of this close reading packet, I suggest that you pull up your copy of the packet in Google Classroom. And if you'll look, as we go through here, you can open a comment. And let me see. I think you can highlight anything and then add a comment. So if I wanted to comment on this historical account of Macbeth, I might put things down like the setting is Scotland, King James was on the first, actually, of England, was on the throne. When Shakespeare wrote this play known as the Scottish play. Maybe I want to go in and I want to put some little doodads, have a bullet list. That way I have my notes here. This is instead of annotation because we're doing everything digitally now and you can't, if you have a printer, feel free to print this out and take notes on it, or you can just take notes on a piece of paper. But I happen to think that if all of you have your own copy of Macbeth, then you can actually take notes. What you see on your screen right now, right here, is my screen and my text. But if you go into Google Classroom and pull up your own and listen to this, I think you can do that, then you can actually type in as I am reading, and that way you can see the words in front of you. And again, if you see the words, hear the words, it's going to make more sense. It's going to focus you. Annotation, as we've discussed a good bit this semester, is taking notes actually on the text, in the text. If you want to, you could take notes and then go back and add these comments on the side. You can listen to my voice and pull up your own copy and make the comments on the side. It really depends on what works best for you. If you can listen to me and type as I go, as I discuss it, or if you really need to see what I'm doing and then go back and add it to yours. So as is true with much of education, a lot of it is what works best for you. I might want to put down here at the beginning when I talk about historical, to put the little note, yes, it's set in medieval Scotland, and it's significant because it's around the time that Beowulf is set. So when you did the research on Anglo-Saxon culture, as I told you in class, you really were doing research for Macbeth also, as far as the thanes and the fiefdoms and the kingdoms and, the kings and feudalism. If any of y'all, I know that a lot of you this semester, some of my students had played the game Skyrim, and they said that it was very similar to this. There are a lot of video games set, historically that maybe overlap with some of this a little bit. People who make video games are well educated and they know what they're doing historically and with literary references. So at any rate, I'm giving you an example now of how to annotate on the digital text on the screen, and also the types of things to jot down. So in a minute, we're going to get into how this is medieval. King James I of England was on the throne when Shakespeare wrote this play, and he wrote it around 1606 written. James I. I'm going to add another bullet. That's one thing about education. Again, you have to do what works for you. There's no one way to do it. So I'm kind of verbally processing as I do this. Unfortunately, all of my notes are left at school. So I'm doing this largely from memory, which means, we hope it goes okay. You know how my memory is. So James the First ascended to the throne of England, ASC, in 1603. I believe, and I know this is part history because it is history of the English language. So during this time, James came after Queen Elizabeth I. And Queen Elizabeth I ushered in the Renaissance, the renewal of art, literature, and really the burgeoning of England and much of Europe coming out of the feudal system. So we have when the play was written, we have where it was written, but then the setting of the play is a little bit different. And the reason it's known as the Scottish play, King James I of England was King James the Sixth of Scotland. He was descended from Mary, Queen of Scots, and he had already been the King of Scotland. And when he was made the King of England, he was the first King James of England, which is really confusing about British history because of the names that repeat. We currently have Queen Elizabeth II, God rest her soul, or bless her, because she's in her 90s and she's been on the throne for a very long time and has been an amazing monarch in England. And she's getting quite elderly, and her son King Charles is next in line to the throne. Okay, so going back to James, he was really of Scotland, and that's just really, really, really important because, there are other things that are significant about this play. King James commissioned the King James Version, King James Version of the Judeo-Christian Bible. And again, I'm not going to type everything in here as I start to talk in a moment. I'm trying to give you an example. All of this is in a comment. Oh, it's pulling me up to the way to tag people or whatever. Okay, so King James Version of the Judeo-Christian Bible was commissioned by King James during this time period. So if any of you are familiar with the King James Version of the Bible, it's Elizabethan English is what it's considered. Shakespeare began writing under Queen Elizabeth, and it's considered Elizabethan English. And King James commissioned the King James Version of the Bible. I'm trying to give you the historical context. And it's thought that Shakespeare actually wrote part of the book of Psalms. So we have several things that are of significance when we study the Scottish play. It's set in Scotland because Shakespeare's writing to his audience, and his audience was the king, and you want to make the king happy. So it's a Scottish play. It's also about good versus evil. King James had written a book on demonology. If you remember in some of the activities that were due the last time you had an assignment due for this unit was about do you believe in spirits and prophecy and witches and all that sort of thing. King James did. And it was very much in keeping with his Christian ideals in that there were forces of good, forces of evil, and there's not really much in between. And again, that goes back to Beowulf. It's a very much a Christian concept during this time period. And so King James wrote a book on demonology, and he commissioned the Judeo-Christian Bible. So by beginning the play with the witches, you saw those different interpretations of the different film versions in the different years. By beginning a play with witches, Shakespeare made King James extremely happy, because you might hear my doggies in the background. I'm sorry, but they are noisy sometimes, especially when I'm not giving them all my attention. So Shakespeare's doing several things. He is making King James happy by writing about a play set in Scotland, where King James was from. He's writing a play about good versus evil with witches, which King James enjoyed. And the very last thing that he did was he made one of the main characters is supposed to be an ancestor of King James. Now, let's see how bright you are. Do you think that Shakespeare would have made the ancestor of the king a good guy or a bad guy? Ding, 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 ding. You are correct. Made him a good guy. His name is Banquo. And hopefully once we get to Banquo, you can look back at this and go, oh yeah, that's who Miss Morris was talking about. So I'm going to click on that comment, and then I'm going to have these notes in here. And again, you may write your notes on a piece of paper if it works for you, or you may type them into the comments, whatever works. But these are a way to do annotations on a digital copy. You have to kind of highlight a portion, and then that comment relates to that. So I wanted to set you up on how to annotate. That's really what I was doing. I jumped ahead a little bit, trying to kill two birds with one stone. But that's a background in annotation. Now let me go back and talk about Macbeth for just a minute. Let's see. Here we go. Now I'm going to do another comment, and I'm going to remind you of some things. I'm going to remind you that we have three divisions of English. We have Old English, which is roughly between 600 to 1100 AD, Anno Domino, in the year of our Lord. It's Latin. And again, I'm going back to what I spent a lot of time on at the beginning of the year as we were learning about Anglo-Saxon history, and then going into Beowulf, because it all connects. Even though, again, Macbeth is written much later, the setting of Macbeth is during that same feudalistic period, Anglo-Saxon United Kingdom. Okay, so Old English was 600 AD to 1100 AD. As a reminder, Beowulf is the most famous text of that time. Anglo-Saxon culture. And we have the battles with the Vikings. And the truth is that Beowulf was a Viking. Beowulf was written in Old English, but the events take place in Norway, Scandinavia, and Denmark. We've talked about that before. So we have this history. We have this history of the Vikings. I'm just trying to kind of not trigger, that's a bad word, but bring back that background knowledge from the beginning of the semester. So we have Beowulf, who is indicative of the Anglo-Saxon culture, but the Viking aspect of the Viking territories, and eventually coming into what is current day England, and the story of Beowulf being written down in Old English by a Christian monk. And again, we've talked about all that. Also remember that the language would not have just 1100 AD. Oops, now we're going on to Middle English. It would have been a very slow process. And next we do have Middle English. And the most famous work